Hello, my name is Aubrey. Today I'm here to do my January and February wrap-up. I read 8 books in the span of 2 months, which isn't great, but I'll explain what happened. A book in particular that kind of put me in a reading slump, and then I had 1 DNF. So I will talk about all of that now. So I'm just going to go in order of the books as I read them, just because I guess that makes the most sense to me. The first book that I finished was a nonfiction book. It's called So Good They Can't Ignore You: Why Skills Trump Passion in the Quest for Work You Love. This is by Cal Newport. I have read Cal Newport's 2 other books. He has one on digital minimalism and he has another one called Deep Work. I think I'd say that Deep Work has been my favorite so far. I don't remember that much about this one now. Like I said, I finished it at the very beginning of January. I think I gave it like 3 stars. I thought he made some good points, but then other points didn't quite make sense to me. Basically, his thesis was the whole idea of following your passion isn't necessarily the best advice, and that often being good at something creates passion. Basically, that passion comes from being really good at something, so we should put the work into being good at something first, and then the passion comes later, was kind of what he was getting at. But it was also, if you're stuck in a dead-end job, you can just get really good at your job and you will then become passionate about it. Maybe I misread it a little bit, but it I don't know, some of it felt a bit off to me, or it didn't quite ring true, though other parts of it did. I definitely think the advice of getting good at something leading to passion, that does ring true. You know, I think that in general being good at something makes us feel good, and so then we become more and more passionate about this thing that we're good at. But, you know, I don't think that that always is the case. I don't know. I thought it was worth a read. I don't know that I will read it again, but yeah, I don't think I'm explaining it very well. Like I said, I don't remember that much. Okay, so the next book that I read was Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. This had a bit of a rocky start for me. I think it definitely suffers from, I don't know, what I'd call like debut syndrome. Like it definitely felt like a debut. You know, the writing was maybe a little clunky. There was a lot of telling and not showing, but I think overall this book really did charm me. I loved the representation in this. This is about Yadriel, who is a transgender boy, and he wants to be a real brujo, and he is trying to prove himself to his family, but his family just doesn't see him the way that he wants to be seen, and so he sets out to prove himself. He uses the brujo magic to summon a ghost who ends up being like the school's bad boy, and things kind of go from there. I don't want to give too much away, but there was just a really lovely romance in this that was super sweet. One of the weird things in the book is that there is a murder plot, but the murder plot kind of takes a sidestep in order to make room for the romance plot, which was fine. You know, truth be told, I think I was more interested in the romance plot, so that was fine with me, but it did feel kind of like, you know, maybe we should get back on track. So, you know, this was good and it was sweet, and like I said, the romance was really charming. I think I ended up giving this 4 stars. I would definitely recommend this if you enjoy YA contemporaries, which generally I don't, but I think, you know, some of the supernatural elements of this and the representation really sold me. So yeah, I just thought this was really nice. So next I read volumes 1, 2, and 3 in Fullmetal Alchemist. This is a bind up of the first 3 volumes, and this was a reread for me, though I haven't finished the series. I talked about that in my top 10 series that I want to read in 2021, so this is on my list of series that I feel like I just absolutely need to finish by the end of this year. So I have started reading it. It was really great. She does a lot of setup in the first 3 volumes. She does a lot of setup in the first volume itself. We meet Edward and Alphonse, who are brothers. They have committed the ultimate sin of alchemy. When they were young boys, they tried to bring back their dead mother, and it went horribly wrong. The younger brother, Alphonse, lost his body, and Edward, trying to get his brother's soul back, had to sacrifice his leg, and so he attached his brother's soul into a suit of armor, and now they're kind of on this quest to get their bodies back. So in the first volume, it introduces obviously these 2 characters. We're introduced introduced to the concept of alchemy and equivalent exchange, and we are introduced to the concept of the Philosopher's Stone, which is basically a stone that allows you to heighten your alchemic abilities, allows you to break the rules of alchemy. In alchemy, it's the rule of equivalent exchange, but the Philosopher's Stone allows you to make more from less, if that makes sense. With the help of the Philosopher's Stone, the two boys would be able to get their bodies back, is their hope. There is just a ton of setup in this first volume. Edward is introduced as this like deeply cynical, faithless person, but he does really care about people. He works for the military, though he hates working for the military, and he's only doing it so that he can have access to their resources to hopefully get them closer to the Philosopher's Stone. This was really good. I highly recommend the series. Volume 2 has, in my opinion, just like the most heart-wrenching storyline of the whole series. It's like it just will punch you in the gut and make you nauseous for days. I forgot how early that story is in the series, and if you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. As fun and silly and lighthearted as this story can be, there is just this like dark undercurrent beneath everything, and I love that balance. I think that is just what makes this series so good. The author did not come to play, you know? The stakes are high, the stakes are so high, and there is just like this ripple of like real icky darkness in this world. That's what these two brothers are up against. There is definitely some silly humor and some more lighthearted things in the story, but there is also just like this heavy gloom of their past. Yeah, I mean, I really love this series. I can't wait to finish it. I can't wait to see where it goes. I highly recommend this. Even if you don't like to read manga, I just feel like this is just a must read anyway. I think I gave every single volume in this 5 stars. Okay, and then I read Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. I listened to this on audio and I really loved it. I had never read anything by Seanan McGuire before, but obviously I've heard great things. She is like a booktube darling at this point. Not that I had been like straight up avoiding this series. They are novellas, so they're really short and they come out every year, which is nice, but I don't know. I had been putting off reading them for some reason. I know that some of them are interconnected, so I didn't know if I would want to read them back to back or not. And I just, I didn't like the idea of waiting every year for a novella, but I've decided to try out Scribd for a little while, which is like an audiobook, ebook service, so like subscription type thing. And they had all of the audiobooks for these, so I just thought I would give it a try. And yeah, I really loved it. I mean, Seanan McGuire is a gorgeous writer. Like, her writing is both so luscious and beautiful, but it also has this like touch of melancholy that I just really loved, and I really enjoyed. I thought that the story was very whimsical in a darker way. So if you don't know, it is a story about a world where children who tumble through doors, the Chronicles of Narnia or Alice in Wonderland, they stumble through these doors that were kind of made perfectly for them, and they go to a world that is made perfectly for them, and they spend some time there, and some children find their way back and then they can't go back through the door. The door disappears and they can't get back to their world, and they have a difficult time adjusting to normal life. And so there's this boarding school led by a woman, like a grown woman with her own door, to help the children kind of readjust. And so we are following Nancy, who comes to the boarding school after being in the Hall of the Dead. I think obviously she's having a really hard time adjusting. She is not the person that she was, and her parents don't recognize her. She's deeply unhappy. She wants to find her door, as do all the other children at the boarding school. And then there's a murder. So then the story quickly becomes this murder mystery. Like I said, I did really enjoy this. I think I would have given it a 4.5. However, I had to knock off half a star because there are some very weird scenes around eating that just seemed really concerning to me. So there's one scene where she first, like, it's her first meal at the new boarding school, and so she only picks up like a plate of like fruits, I think, just like a few, like just like a little bit of food, and someone comments, hey, that's not a lot of food, and she basically makes up an excuse like, oh, I'm just still nervous from my travels or whatever. And then one of the other characters says like, you know, I'm only eating spinach and steak or something, like, for my iron levels. Obviously, that's weird. And so, you know, Seanan McGuire is just trying to show us how far being in these worlds affects these children, you know, which is fine. Like, that's part of the world building, and I think that that's fine to show. And it felt weird at the time, but it was like, okay. And so, you know, the story moves on. That one didn't bother me too much. But then there's this whole monologue that the main character does in her own head where she's basically ranting about like, my parents don't understand. I could sustain on a grape because in my world we didn't have to move. Like, I had to be so still, and so I can sustain on like just like the smallest amounts of food. And that just like really, really concerned me, especially because this is never challenged by the story or by any of the other characters. Like, this is just in her thoughts. I don't know, that just glared out at me as being so weird and weirdly specific that I was just like, is Seanan McGuire okay? Does somebody need to check on her? I myself have never had an eating disorder, but eating disorders are very close to my heart, and in my experience with other people, generally their attitude is that they are the exception. Other people need to eat, but I don't need to eat. I can live off of 500 calories a day. It's fine, right? And so I don't know, that whole little thing, and I wish I had a physical copy that I could read it to you. But it just, wow, it like really put me off, especially, like I said, it was never challenged by any of the other characters. I feel like all she would have needed to do was to write someone, coming up to her and saying like, hey, maybe you can get away with eating that in your world, but in the real world, like, you need to eat more food than that. Just having somebody challenge her and challenge her way of thinking would have made me feel a lot better about it. And I'd never heard anybody talk about that, maybe because it's just part of the world building, and again, her trying to show just how much these worlds affect the children, which again is fine, but I don't know, I kind of wish she had picked a different way to show that rather than super unhealthy eating habits. That just felt a little bit irresponsible to me, considering that eating disorders are the #1 most fatal mental illness. I just wanted to mention that because I had never heard anybody talking about it before, and that aspect of the book really did concern me. So otherwise I would have given this 4.5 stars. As it stands, I give it 4 stars. Like I said, I do think it was a lovely book, a lovely read, and I don't think that Seanan McGuire meant any harm. I just found it kind of jarring. So, and then the next book that I finished was The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. And this book put me in a big old reading slump. And I am so sad to say that because I was enjoying this so much at the beginning. We are following Rin, who is an orphan girl living in a impoverished village with 2 opium dealers. She is destined to be married off to a gross old man in the village. She doesn't want that life. She's not interested. She decides that she's going to try to get into this super prestigious military school, and she's going to study her ass off, and she's going to get in with only 2 years of studying, where most other kids spend their entire lives and their parents' fortunes learning and training and whatever to get into the school. She does it in 2 years. She gets in, she starts her training, and so, the first half of the book takes place in this school setting. She's training, she's learning with her master about meditation, and she's learning about the gods. She is introduced to the idea of controlling or kind of projecting a god like through your body and using their power, more like they are using your body for their own power. Her master warns against this, and Rin is still allured by that idea of having that much power. So yeah, like I said, I really enjoyed the first part, the school setting, the characters. She has a rivalry going with one of the other students who is this kind of pretty boy, rich kid. He looks down on her because of the color of her skin. She's much darker than the other students. She's obviously much poorer than the other students, but you know, she is just as good, if not better, and that is really threatening to them. But then, you know, kind of halfway through the book, a war breaks out, hell breaks loose. She is separated from all of the friends that she made at school, and she is sent off to be in this like team of weirdos, basically, because she can harness the power of a god, and so can most of these other members of this team. So that part kind of goes from there. I don't sort of know how to fix the problems I had with this. I don't know if it should have been like 2 separate books, or if she should have kept some of the characters from the beginning in the second half. I mean, some of them do come back eventually, but that takes a while, and so then we're introduced to all these new characters, and then those characters don't have enough time to be fleshed out, and Rin herself as a character starts to become super inconsistent, which just got really annoying. She wants the power, but then she's afraid of the power, but then she's gonna use the power anyway, but then she's like, oh, but maybe we shouldn't be using it. And then, like, I just felt like she was flip-flopping all the time. I didn't like that, you know, after everything that she's been through, after her whole upbringing, she was following Altan, who is the leader of this little, like, misfit group. She was just following him around like a puppy, even though he was mistreating her. I don't know. I was like really not enjoying this by the end of it. And the way that I usually read books, like the first half of a book usually takes me the longest to read. And then once I hit that middle point, I usually will just binge read the rest of the book. It's like once I can see the finish line, I really want to finish. But with this, I was like pulling teeth. Every time I would sit down to read, I would just like read a little bit, and then I'd be like, okay, I'm done. Like, I don't want to read anymore. I just was not enjoying it. And there's a scene in here pretty late in the book. They discover this town that has basically just been like gutted by the enemy, and the things that she describes in this book are truly horrific. And I think they're important because this is based on historical events, but at the same time, the way she lays it out, and the way that everything is described, and also based on like the tone of the novel thus far, that chapter in particular felt like it was such a shock value chapter. I read it, I felt nauseous for hours. I'm not saying she shouldn't have included it. I do think it's important. Nothing thus far had been that graphic, and nothing thus far had been that awful. And maybe that was the point, which, you know, fair enough, fine. Everybody says this series is a grimdark series. I've never read grimdark before, so I don't know. I don't have anything to compare it to, but it just, nothing about it until that point felt grimdark. And then it was like, oh, okay. A whole chapter of tragedy of war, right? Just shoved in your face. There was just like a bluntness to it that I still don't know how I feel about. Unfortunately, I didn't love this. I think that I will still try to read the next book and see how I feel about it. I am already starting to forget stuff, so if I'm gonna carry on, I'll have to do it soon. But yeah, if you've read this and you didn't love it and you did love the second one, please let me know, because I want to like the series. I know a lot of people really love it. I had really high hopes for it, but unfortunately, I think I just found it really frustrating. I felt like Rin just really never developed as a character at all, and that is weird because there is so much time jumping in this book. Like, we start off with her being this I don't know how old she is at the beginning of the book, but I'm guessing she's like a kid, and then she trains for 2 years, studies for 2 years, she gets into the academy. We jump 2 years from there, and then the war breaks out, and I don't remember how much time passes during the war, but there's like a lot of time passing in this book that we kind of jump through, and Rin just always feels the same. you know, she just always feels like the same character, except when she's being inconsistent. But it's not like character growth. It's like one page she feels this way, and then another page she feels another way. You know, it's not growth. And then she'll just flip back because the story needs her to. I mean, she just felt really immature to me through the whole thing. And it makes sense for her to be immature when she's a kid. I'm guessing she's probably like 18 or 19 by now. If you read the second one, please let me know your thoughts, because I'm still kind of on the fence whether or not I want to continue. I think I will at least give it a try. I mean, I bought a copy of it, so I feel like I might as well. Okay, and then the next book that I read on audio was Down Among the Sticks and Bones. This was the second of the Wayward Children series of Seanan McGuire. I'm not sure why I have this one physically and not the first one. I must have gotten it from like Book Outlet a long time ago, but I really, really loved this. It's following two of the characters from the first book, and it's basically their backstory, their origin story. It's kind of a like Dracula Frankenstein world. The two twins are split up. One goes to live like in a castle with a vampire, and the other one goes to work with a Frankenstein-esque doctor. It's about their childhood and their experience in the world and their relationship as sisters. And yeah, I mean, she's a great writer, and I really loved this. I don't think I have much to say about it other than it was great. I think I gave this 5 stars, so I'm excited to continue on with more of the Wayward Children's books. I hope I like them just as much. And then I had my first DNF of the year. This was A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Brigid Kemmerer. I didn't go into this book with very high expectations or anything. Like, I went into this thinking that it was just gonna be kind of fun and fluffy and like a fast read, which, you know, it was definitely like an easy read. So this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling where our main character gets kidnapped and thrust into this fantasy world where the prince has been having his guard travel to another world to get girls to bring back to his world so that he can break the curse, right? This is a really interesting concept. Like I said, I had kind of not high hopes, but you know, it's fun, right? That's like a fun situation. She's from DC. And, you know, suddenly she's like in this castle, in this fantasy world, and, you know, she's a fish out of water. Like, it's a fun idea. The main character has cerebral palsy, and I love that representation. I can't speak to whether or not it was good representation, but it seemed like good representation to me, and it was just kind of cool to see in a book. But, you know, ultimately this just was not for me, like, at all. I gave it a try. I gave it a real try. I think I got up to like the 50% mark. I was reading it on my Kindle, so it like gives you the percentage of how far you are in the book like as you read. So I got up to about the 50% mark, and I just was not enjoying it, mostly because I found so many aspects of it deeply frustrating. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. Some of it might not be fair. Like I said, I didn't finish the book, so if some of this stuff gets better as the book goes on, that's fair and that's fine. But up until that 50% mark, I was just like very frustrated. I was very frustrated. I'm about to talk about all of the aspects that I found really frustrating. I might be spoiling some stuff. Like I said, I only got to the 50% mark, so I don't know how it ends. I can't spoil the ending. I don't know what happens. I'm going to be talking specifics, and if you don't want to hear specifics, then you may want to click off the video now. This is the last book that I'll be talking about. So my first thing is that it just really didn't feel like a curse. So she's at this castle. The prince is still just like a normal human prince. He becomes a monster at the end of the season, and the season is like this time loop that he and his one guard are stuck in over and over and over again. And at the end of each season, if the curse isn't broken, he becomes a beast and he kills people. And so, you know, that part, okay, yeah, I see that that is a curse. He has seemingly murdered his entire family and staff and like everyone. All that's left is him and his guard. But until that point, he's just a handsome human prince. And the castle is enchanted, but like there are magical instruments that play music all the time. The pantry, like kitchen area seems to just refill itself with yummy food. The bathwater is always drawn and it's always hot. That didn't feel like a curse to me, you know? I just think it would have been interesting if for him, and again, maybe this comes up later in the book, I don't know. I just think it would have been interesting if, like, for him, the music sounds bad. He tastes the food and it's all terrible. He tries to bathe and it's always cold for him, right? Like, maybe for everyone else, yeah, like the food's great, whatever, but like for him, it's painful. But, you know, as far as I read, that was not the case. And then, you know, on top of that, so it's been established that this is their like 300th season, which means that there have been many other women before our main character. Many attempts to break the curse and none have been successful. And so by this point in his journey, he's kind of like resigned. You know, there are like references to him being like an asshole before all of this started, but he doesn't seem to be anymore after all of this time, after he killed his family and whatever else. Yes, maybe he is a little bit self-important. He does kidnap our main character, or, you know, he has his guard do it. So, you know, I'm not saying that he's perfect, but there's not a whole lot of room for him to grow as a character. If you think about the traditional Beauty and the Beast, like the Beast is a problem. Not only does he look the part, but he is aggressive, he is mean, he locks her father up in a dungeon, he forces her to stay there against her will, he screams at her, he loses his temper at his, you know, his friends, his subjects. You know, there's a lot of room for development over the course of the story, but with this guy, it's just like, he's already kind of done the humbling experience 300 times before. You know, all of this tension between our main character and him at the beginning, I mean, it makes sense because she was kidnapped. And so it is established that her mother is sick, she's dying of cancer, and her brother is kind of working for these guys who are not good guys, and they keep sending him on these errands that put him in danger, and they make him do things that he doesn't want to do, but he does it because he needs the money, or I think they're like paying off a debt that their father had made. I don't know. It's like a whole thing. Anyway, she wants to get home to her sick mother and her brother who needs her and will be worried about her. And he was the result of her being kidnapped. And so she's like bitter about the fact that she's even there and that's his fault. Like, okay, but I think it's a problem that, yes, he brought her over here, but now it's like out of his hands, right? Like he can't control letting her go or putting her back. Like he's not doing that anymore. Like he did it, but then it's like, you know, it's kind of out of his control. Again, this leaves nowhere for him to go as a character. And like the story keeps alluding to this like super terrible thing that he did to his guard, Gray, who was for me like the best character in the book of what I read. So he had done this really terrible thing to his guard, but then just about where I stopped reading, and this is part of why I stopped reading, he apologizes for this thing that he thought he did that was so terrible, and then Gray is like, you know, actually it wasn't that bad. You know, what you did like wasn't terrible and you don't need to apologize for it. And so, you know, for me, I was just like, okay, so where is the character development? Like, I don't understand. He wasn't a bad person to begin with. He's not a bad person now. Like, what? Like, where are we going? I really didn't like that aspect. I feel like there wasn't enough tension for a Beauty and the Beast retelling. Like there should be a lot of tension there. Kind of the classic hate to love story. Our main character is mad at him for what he did, but you know, there's also this issue of, well, he only did it because he was trying to break the curse and like save his kingdom. It's selfish and unselfish at the same time. So yeah, that's kind of its own issue. And then I have an issue with the fact that the main character knows about the curse. Like she figures it out. The first woman in 300 years to ever figure out what the curse is. He tells her that there's a curse she needs to break, and she's like, oh, so I guess you need me to fall in love with you. And he's like, what? How did you figure it out? But, you know, like, there's just this huge issue with the Belle character knowing about the curse. And maybe I'm just bitter because the live action remake Disney version got this wrong too, but it's really important that the Belle character doesn't know about the curse. First of all, it's too much pressure for a new relationship, right? Like, hey, by the way, I need you to fall in love with me to like save myself and a whole bunch of other people. Like, too much pressure for a relationship. And then number two, so there's the scene where she says like, okay, so you need me to fall in love with you to break the curse. And he's like, yeah, basically. And she says, I'm not going to fall in love with you. I think this is supposed to make us feel like she's strong and defiant, and I don't know what this is supposed to make us feel, but it just makes her look bad. And I don't think it's supposed to. So he tells her about the curse and her response is, I'm not going to fall in love with you. And then that makes her look like a jerk because she is at the very least condemning him to death. And, you know, second of all, she's probably condemning a whole bunch of other people to death because the beast coming at the end of the season is something that she knows about. She knows that the beast has been killing people. And so her being unwilling to try to fall in love with him, you know, makes her seem uncaring about all these other people who are going to be affected by the beast. If the last remaining royalty dies, then there's at least going to be some kind of grab for power, war, who knows? There would be like a ton of repercussions for not breaking the curse. And so her being unwilling to even entertain the idea makes her seem selfish and it makes her feel like a jerk when it's not supposed to, and she just shouldn't know to begin with. She should not know about the curse. Belle should never know about the curse. Yeah, that bothered me a lot too, because again, she's like, I'm not gonna fall in love with you, but it's not like I wouldn't fall in love with someone like you, right? Because he's not really that bad to begin with. Yes, he kidnapped her, but she doesn't she brings it up, but she doesn't bring it up as if that makes him a bad person. He did a bad thing, and she's acknowledging that, but it's not like I would never fall in love with someone like you because you are selfish or you are uncaring or whatever. Like, she's not making those connections. She's just like, I'm not going to fall in love with you. Again, because there's no character growth. He's not in like a bad place to begin with. But then of course, like, her heart still goes pitter patter anytime he's near her or like touches her or whatever. So it just like, and then there's the whole issue of like the world building. So the castle and like the surrounding area of the castle is stuck in this time loop. They've been stuck in this time loop for a long time. But outside of the castle, time just goes on like normal. But you can just pass through this time bubble just fine. It'll be summer where the castle is, and then you cross over the border and suddenly it's winter. And so it's established that in the 300 seasons, it's been like 5 years of real time. And so time outside of the castle bubble has been going on for like 5 years. And like, forgive me, you know, I'm not super big on history, but like, you know, monarchs are still a form of government, right? And I imagine that they do things for their country, for their like ruling area. And the idea that this castle has just been going on empty with a prince and his guard, these two people as the only remaining government, have not had any sort of repercussions seemingly at all. Like, they do eventually venture out of the bubble and they come upon like an inn, and the only comments that anybody seems to give are like, oh wow, we haven't seen royalty in like 5 years. Wow. Not like, the country's falling to pieces because there's no government. So I don't know, maybe that part is like explained better in the latter half of the book. I don't know. I didn't finish it, but that just seemed a bit ridiculous to me. Like, there was kind of an invading army plot, but you know, the idea that after 5 years, this is like the only problem they've had, just, that all felt super flimsy and not very well thought out. And then on top of all of that, the writing is just not good. It's really not good. And I was actually just taken aback by the quality of the writing being as bad as it was. And this being like a traditionally published book, there is just so much telling. There is so much telling instead of showing. It's on every page, like almost every paragraph. If you don't know what I mean by that, it's basically like, in good storytelling, you want to show and not tell. Basically, if someone is sad, you want to show us through their actions, through their body language, through their thoughts, that they're sad. You don't want to tell the reader that they're sad. If someone is anxious and you want to show that the character is anxious, you would write that they're like bobbing their leg, or they're having anxious thoughts. Maybe they're checking the time frequently. You would want to show us that they're anxious, not just tell us that they're anxious. And there is just so much telling. There's just so much telling. There's telling of how things work. There's telling of emotions. There is telling of thoughts, and just it just felt like I was reading an unpolished draft, you know? It just really felt like, wow, this needed like several more edits to get this to a place where I think it should have been published. I mean, it just felt really sloppy to me. It wasn't good. And you know, I can excuse writing that's not the best for a good story. For example, I really love Blake Crouch. I don't think he's the best writer, but his stories are always really entertaining. Brandon Sanderson, I don't think is the best writer, but you know, I really loved Skyward. I thought that that was a really fun, exciting book. And this, unfortunately, just wasn't my jam. You know? So yeah, like I said, my first DNF of the year. Very exciting. I really don't like to DNF books. Usually I'm the type of person who, I usually never admit to myself when I'm DNFing a book. It'll be like, I'm not enjoying this, and I'll set it down with the intention that one day I'll pick it back up again, but then I don't, you know? This was like a straight up DNF. Just not enjoying it and don't want to finish it. So I think that's everything. That was my whole January and February wrap up. I hope you are all doing really well, and I hope to see you next time. Please like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to see more from me. I will see you next time.